My name is Commander John Lipinski, United States Navy, retired. And today I'd like to give you a little history on my life and my connection with the F-111 aircraft. The F-111 was a very controversial plane, and it cost $1 billion to develop. Some people refer to it as TFX. Some call it F-111A. Others call it F-111B. A lot of people call it the aardvark. It grew out of the need of the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marines, all wanting a new type aircraft that had survivability during combat. The Navy wanted a plane that could loiter, protect the fleet, go at least Mach 2 or 3, fire the latest missiles, and attack the enemy out 200 miles away, protect the ship. The Air Force wanted a plane to replace the B-52 and have the capability to carry twice the weapons of a B-52 for twice the range and at twice the speed, and be able to follow the terrain 200 to 400 feet above the terrain for penetration. The Air Force initially had the B-52 Hustler, the B-52 massive bomber, but it didn't go very fast. It flew high and it was subject to being shot down by the missiles that the Russians had developed. By going in at high speed, low altitude, they figured the radar couldn't track them, and the missile had to be fired and get up to them, but they would be going so fast, so low, there would be no time involved, and they could deliver their weapon. The Marines wanted some kind of an airplane that could have a short field takeoff in rough terrain, carry a heavy bomb load, and support the ground troops with a Gatling gun or some type of a massive weapon. Nobody could agree on what type of airplane could be made to serve all those functions. The various admirals and generals in all the services said that it couldn't be done. You had to have individual airplanes to meet the need. When McNamara took over the Defense Department, and he was the guy that was a whiz kid on research and mathematics, and he was adamant that you could build one airplane which would serve all three functions. It could go fast, it could go far, it could carry more weapons, it could loiter longer, and ultimately would be a combination of parts for all the services and would have a repair depot for the one type airplane. Well, this went on for several years prior to 1962, and they were trying to reach some agreement between the services. So each of the services put out a bid, and Congress looked at it and decided that it would be cheaper in the long run if that could be done. I'd like to back up and go back through history of the world. When you go way back into history, the first weapon was when some caveman picked up a rock and discovered that he could take that rock and throw it. The next thing he discovered, he could take a stick with a Y on the end of it and put the rock in it, and he could fling that rock harder and throw it further. The next step through the centuries, somewhere along the line, the cavemen developed a way to make a crude bow and arrow and shoot that arrow. But before that happened, the caveman discovered a knife. He could take a rock, sharpen it up, tie it on the end of a pole, and have a spear. And he could throw that spear. So all of these developments took ages. And usually it was right after that person had a battle or a war with another tribe or some other person. And after each war, a new development of various weapons came along. They would capture the idea and modify it and upgrade it, and eventually armies like Genghis Khan was able to put together and capture numerous other tribes and capture their weapons and their design and modify them. And as time went on, you get into the Crusades, and somebody developed a knife, which was probably the first caveman. He sharpened a rock. He attached that rock to the spear, and then he threw the spear. And then somebody made a bow and arrow and made a rock on the end of the arrow and shot it. And then the development got into the Chinese developed gunpowder. Gunpowder was a psychological weapon first. They could shoot it up in the air, and it made a big loud boom, and fire would come onto the sky and chase the enemy away. After a while, they figured if they could shoot that stuff up in the air, why couldn't they put a rock in a tube and shoot it? And it was the development of a cannon. So then that went into a bigger cannon, more explosive, bigger wars. And as you can see through the centuries, every single war, whether it was caused by religion or caused by some pharaoh wanting his neighbor's farm or his neighbor's food or neighbor's land, it would develop into a battle. All through the 50s, we developed multiple different types of airplanes that were better than we had used in World War I and World War II. World War I, they had paper airplanes, and they developed a tracer bullet that they could shoot at each other out of a pistol and set the other guy on fire. And they had a little bomb that paper airplane could carry over and drop on somebody. That developed into then the First World War, and that developed into an Air Force. Each time the Air Force made a new airplane, it needed a bigger, more forceful engine, which caused again, mass production of an engine more powerful airplane. Somebody developed a jet. A lot of the jet age is attributed to Adolf Hitler. He had the first jet airplanes. Now, when you make an airplane, what your plane is made of and how light you can make it and how fast you can make the propulsion and how far it will go and the amount of weight that it will carry and how long it can stay in the air usually determines who's going to win the battle. So now we get into the 60s, and they looked at the planes that were developed in the 50s with the jet engines and the various wing designs, and a couple of guys came up with a delta wing that could lift a lot of weight. It could go very fast, but it couldn't go very far with the engines that they had. One of those was the gutless Cutlass. That caused problems. How do you get rid of that excessive heat that's blasting out of those jet engines? That caused a whole new industry to come up with various planes that could take off, and eventually the delta wing could go fast, but it couldn't take off. It needed a long, long runway to get enough speed up to get enough lift to get off the runway. So you're looking at the requirements that the Air Force wanted: heavy bomber, long range, low altitude, penetration, and carry a massive amount of bombs and various types of missiles. You look at what the Navy wanted. They wanted a reconnaissance airplane that could go out, stay out a long time, shoot missiles, detect the enemy, and shoot them down 200 miles away. So all of these developments, when McNamara came along, he said, we've got to put them all in one airplane and make it work. So they sent bids out to Boeing, General Dynamics, and a total of 5 different companies to try to come up with a common airplane with commonality, parts and stuff. But then the politics got into it. The political arena, they wanted a cheaper airplane if they could get it, and a common airplane, but they couldn't satisfy the military leaders. Each military leader said it couldn't be done. Well, McNamara said it couldn't be done because we didn't try it.